August 18, 1943. High above the jungles of Bougainville Island, Japanese ace pilot Lieutenant Commander Takeo Tanamizu watched through his canopy as a strange American aircraft approached. Its twin booms and central nacelle made it look ungainly, almost comical. He had heard whispers about this new fighter, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, but seeing it now, he couldn't help but smile. His Mitsubishi A6M0, the undisputed master of Pacific skies for 2 years, had torn through every American fighter it encountered. This awkward-looking twin-engine contraption would be no different. Tanamizu signaled his wingmen with confidence. They would show these Americans what real aerial combat looked like. But within 90 seconds, 3 of his squadron would be falling from the sky in burning metal coffins, and Tanamizu would be desperately diving for cloud cover, his Zero riddled with holes from a weapons system he never saw coming. This is the story of how Japanese pilots' catastrophic underestimation of the P-38 Lightning led to one of the most dramatic reversals in aerial warfare history, and how American engineering created a weapon so devastating that it would hunt down and kill the architect of Pearl Harbor himself. In early 1943, the Japanese Naval Air Force ruled the Pacific with absolute authority. Their philosophy was elegant and brutal: build the lightest, most maneuverable fighter possible, and train pilots to exploit every ounce of that agility. The Zero embodied this thinking perfectly. At just over 500 pounds empty, it could turn inside any Allied fighter. Its range was extraordinary, over 1,900 miles, allowing it to strike targets that seemed impossibly distant. Japanese pilots trained for years before seeing combat, creating an elite force of experienced aviators who treated aerial combat as an art form. By the time America entered the war, Zero pilots had already cut their teeth against Chinese and British opponents, racking up kill ratios that seemed almost mythical. When they encountered American fighters in the war's opening months, the results were predictable. The P-40 Warhawks, while rugged, couldn't match the Zero's maneuverability. The F-4F Wildcats were tough but slow. American pilots were dying, and they knew it. The psychological impact was immense. Entire squadrons reported feeling outclassed before the first shot was fired. Then came reports of a new American fighter. Intelligence photos showed something bizarre: a twin-engine aircraft with a distinctive twin-boom design. Yap. Japanese analysts examined these images with a mixture of curiosity and dismissiveness. Twin engines meant weight. Weight meant less maneuverability. Less maneuverability meant death against a Zero. The math seemed simple. Some Japanese pilots even joked that the Americans had built a bomber and forgotten to add the bomb bay. The cultural mindset reinforced this contempt. Japanese military doctrine glorified the warrior spirit, the belief that superior training and fighting spirit could overcome material disadvantages. Bushido, the way of the warrior, taught that the man mattered more than the machine. So when they looked at the P-38, they saw exactly what they expected to see: typical American excess. Building something big and complicated when simple and light was clearly superior. They had no idea they were staring at the weapon that would break their air superiority forever. The P-38 Lightning was born from a 1937 Army Air Corps specification that seemed impossible. They wanted an interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, with exceptional climb rate and enough firepower to destroy bombers. Traditional single-engine designs couldn't meet these requirements. Kelly Johnson, Lockheed's young chief engineer, proposed something radical: 2 Allison V1710 engines mounted on twin booms, with the cockpit and armament in a central nacelle. The design was unconventional, but the numbers were undeniable. With 2,600 combined horsepower, the P-38 could reach 444 miles per hour, faster than any Japanese fighter. Its twin-turbo supercharged engines gave it phenomenal high-altitude performance. But the real revolution was in the nose. Unlike other fighters with wing-mounted guns that required convergence settings and created limited effective range, the P-38 mounted all its weapons in the nose: 450 caliber, Browning M2 machine guns, and 120 mm Hispano cannon, all firing straight ahead. This created a concentrated cone of fire with no convergence issues. When a P-38 pilot pulled the trigger, 900 rounds per minute of mixed firepower created a stream of destruction that could saw through aircraft structures like a circular saw through plywood. The Japanese first encountered P-38s in November 1942 during the Guadalcanal campaign, but these early engagements were inconclusive. The Lightning pilots were still learning their aircraft, and Japanese pilots successfully exploited the P-38's one weakness. It couldn't turn with a zero in a traditional dogfight. This reinforced Japanese confidence. See, they told each other, American planes are fast in a straight line but useless in real combat, but American pilots and tacticians were learning too. Major Thomas McGuire and Major Richard Bong, who would become America's top aces, began developing tactics specifically designed for the P-38's strengths. They called it boom and zoom. Use your speed and climb rate to position above the enemy. Dive down at tremendous velocity. Fire your concentrated nose armament. Then use your excess speed to climb back to altitude before the enemy can react. Never turn with a zero. Never slow down. Turn every engagement into an energy fight where the P-38's superior power to weight ratio and speed gave it an insurmountable advantage. By mid-1943, these tactics had been refined and distributed to P-38 squadrons across the Pacific. The results were about to shock the Japanese Naval Air Force to its core. The battle that shattered Japanese confidence came on April 18, 1943, but its roots lay in American signals intelligence. Navy codebreakers had intercepted and decrypted messages revealing that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack and Japan's most brilliant naval strategist, would be conducting an inspection tour of forward bases in the Solomon Islands. His itinerary was precise. He would fly from Rabaul to Balile Airfield on Bougainville, departing at 6 a.m., arriving at 8 a.m. The Americans saw an opportunity that was almost too good to believe. Kill Yamamoto and you decapitate Japanese naval leadership. The problem was distance. Bougainville was 435 miles from the nearest American base at Guadalcanal, right at the edge of fighter range. Only one American fighter had the legs to make the trip. The P-38 Lightning. 18 P-38s from the 33 Ninth Fighter Squadron took off at 7:10 a.m., flying at wave-top height to avoid radar detection. They carried drop tanks to extend their range, turning their fighters into long-range assassins. Leading the mission was Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber. Two pilots who'd mastered the boom and zoom technique. At 9:35 a.m., they spotted their target. Two Mitsubishi G4M bombers escorted by 6 Zero fighters, flying at just 459 feet. Yamamoto was in the lead bomber. The Zeros never saw the P-38s coming. Lanphier and Barber screamed up from below, their twin engines roaring at full military power. The Japanese pilots reacted exactly as their training dictated. The Zeros immediately turned to engage, confident their superior maneuverability would win the day. But the P-38 pilots didn't turn. Lanphier went for the bombers while Barber took the lead aircraft. What happened next lasted less than 60 seconds but changed the course of the Pacific War. Barber's P-38 closed to 500 yards. His nose-mounted weapons created a cone of fire that no aircraft could survive. The NT-50 caliber rounds and 20 mm shells walked up the bomber's fuselage like a buzzsaw. The right engine exploded. The right wing tore away. Admiral Yamamoto's bomber rolled inverted and plunged into the jungle below, disintegrating on impact. The admiral who had planned Pearl Harbor died in the wreckage, killed by the very weapon his pilots had dismissed as an overweight American failure. The psychological impact on Japanese aviators was immense. Yamamoto wasn't just their commander. He was a symbol, a man considered untouchable. If the P-38 could reach out 35 miles and kill him with surgical precision, what did that say about Japanese air superiority? The answer came in the months that followed, and it was written in burning Zero wreckage across the Pacific sky. By late 1943, P-38 squadrons had refined their tactics to a lethal science. They hunted in pairs or 4 shit flights, always maintaining an energy advantage. Japanese pilots found themselves in an impossible situation. If they tried to dogfight, the P-38 simply refused to engage on those terms, climbing away at rates the Zero couldn't match. If they tried to run, the Lightnings were faster. If they tried to dive away, The P-38's superior high-speed handling meant they could follow. The only safe option was to never engage at all. But that meant conceding control of the sky to the Americans. The kill ratios tell the story. In 1942, before P-38 tactics were refined, Japanese pilots maintained rough parity with American forces. By mid-1944, P-38 squadrons were achieving kill ratios of 10-1 or better. Major Richard Bong alone shot down 40 Japanese aircraft, primarily while flying the P-38. Major Thomas Maguire scored 38 kills. The Lightning wasn't just winning, it was dominating. All Japanese pilots who survived encounters with P-38s reported something even more demoralizing than the aircraft itself. American pilots were getting better. The rookie pilots of 1942 had been replaced by combat veterans who understood energy tactics, who used their radios to coordinate attacks, who treated aerial combat as a science rather than an art form. Japanese pilot quality, meanwhile, was declining. Their intense training pipeline couldn't replace losses quickly enough. By 1944, Japanese rookies with barely 100 hours of flight time were being thrown against American veterans with 500 hours and dozens of kills. The P-38's technical advantages compounded this disparity. Its twin engines provided redundancy. Zeros shot down P-38s, but many Lightning pilots made it home on one engine, something impossible in a single-engine fighter. The cockpit, nestled between the booms, was surrounded by engines and structure, providing better protection than the Zero's minimalist design. P-38 pilots could take hits that would kill a Zero pilot and keep fighting. The concentrated nose armament meant every burst had maximum effect. Zero pilots reported that P-38 fire seemed to destroy aircraft with impossible efficiency. They were right. The 450 caliber machine guns alone fired 900 rounds per minute. Add the 20 mm cannon and a 2-second burst put 96 50 caliber rounds and 10 explosive shells into a target area the size of a washtub at 400 yards. No aircraft could survive that kind of punishment. By 1945, Japanese pilots had developed a grim respect for the P-38. Intelligence reports show they nicknamed it the Fork-tailed Devil, a reference to its distinctive twin-boom design and its seemingly demonic effectiveness. Some Japanese pilots reported that simply seeing P-38s in the distance was enough to cause formations to break up and scatter. The aircraft that had been laughed at in 1943 was now the most feared fighter in the Pacific theater. The final statistics are staggering. P-38s destroyed more Japanese aircraft than any other U.S. Army Air Force fighter in the Pacific. They flew more missions than any other twin-engine fighter in history. And despite facing the most experienced Japanese pilots in the war's early years, they maintained a kill-to-loss ratio that proved the superiority of American engineering and tactics over Japanese assumptions about maneuverability and warrior spirit. The story of the P-38 Lightning is more than a tale of technological triumph. It's a case study in how assumptions can kill. Japanese pilots looked at the P-38's twin engines and unconventional design and saw confirmation of their own beliefs about what made a superior fighter. They never questioned whether their philosophy was correct. They never adapted their tactics until it was too late. They certainly never imagined that the ungainly-looking American fighter would become the weapon that ended their air superiority and killed their greatest admiral. When Lieutenant Commander Takeo Tanamizu pulled out of his dive that August day in 1943, his Zero trailing smoke from a dozen hits, he had learned what thousands of Japanese pilots would learn in the months to come. In modern warfare, the best fighter isn't always the most maneuverable. Sometimes it's the one with better speed, better climb rate, better firepower, and pilots who understood how to use those advantages. The Japanese had laughed at the P-38 Lightning. But the fork-tailed Devil had the last laugh, and it was written in the burning wreckage of Japanese air power across 10,000 miles of Pacific sky.